So just a bit of history. We were the pilot scheme in 2017 for Kells Kickstart, which we did 25 buildings around the historic core of Kells. We then went on to last year, continuing on that scheme with another, I think it was about 10 buildings, bringing the historic core of Kells regeneration down to the Kells Courthouse, which is another building that Meath County Council have been working on as well in terms of a new tourist facility and a new artist hub. This year we identified Navan as the key spot where we needed to inject some energy and rejuvenation, I suppose you could say. The reason we chose Navan, it's a typical example of many market towns throughout the country, some out of town shopping centres. The historic core, although quite vibrant still, has been neglected to a certain degree. As part of a bigger plan for Navan as well, we have a Navan 2030 scheme, which is a transport and public realm scheme, which is going to be run out over the next 10 years. So this aspect was going to tie quite nicely in with that. So we identified 3 different sites in the town itself: an old classical school, which is owned by the council themselves, a Victorian terrace, which originally all residences has now been turned into, in drips and drabs, commercial premises, which looks a bit unsightly. And then the other potential option was Navan Town Square itself, called the Market Square, where there are a few key buildings on the square that were in very sort of poor repair. One of them being, we chose 2, both in private ownership, one in a private individual and one commercial premises. The St. Lawrence Hotel, which is this grey building here, which is on the south side of the Market Square, and on the east side, the Meath Chronicle building, which is the local county newspaper. Basically, the historic core itself spreads along in the conservation area, Navan Town Conservation Area. So these buildings, not only are they in the conservation area, they are also recorded protected structures. The St. Lawrence Hotel, this is just a quick selection of photographs of the history of the building itself. Changed names over many years. These are late Georgian. This building was built in 1780. The other building I'll talk about in a minute. I'm going to go through one at a time. I'll do the St. Lawrence Hotel first, and then we'll look at the Meath Chronicle building. So the St. Lawrence Hotel, 5-bay, 3-story over basement, small little basement under the street. A lot of these buildings have little sort of cellars projecting under, which is probably quite typical of many Irish towns. The owner himself had bought the building only a couple of years ago, and the site itself includes this little building over this which is now an Eddie Rockets, I think. The front facade had been changed over the years. In sort of 1980s, a rear part of the building, there's an extensive site on this. It extends way back to 2 other streets, but it really is, we were just looking at the street facade. Budget-wise too, we constrained ourselves to the facade only. We didn't get involved in the rest of the building, which actually was of benefit to us in terms of not having to deal with fire certs or building applications, building regulations, and things like that. The interesting thing about the 2 projects we were working on is they were both live projects within the planning system at the time. So a little bit of history on this. Had changed many times over the years. The name had changed from the St. Lawrence Hotel. It became a few different other projects, a few different other names. There was a nightclub. It was the Central Hotel at one stage, which has now moved up the street. Over the years too, in the late 1800s, the chimneys were changed and brick was introduced. There was an eaves course of brick introduced at that time as well. And this is how we pretty much found it, boarded up, smack bang in the town centre, so quite unsightly. Some works, as I said, had been carried out internally. There was very little of the original building left inside, no nice plaster work. There was a sort of a nice little dog-like stair, which was probably in the Victorian era. That was about it. Everything else had been removed. Some nice stone buildings at the rear of the building as well. But the shop fronts themselves were actually fitted in the 1980s. This was the little stair that we found, but the rest of the building, pretty much a shell inside. But again, we were really concentrating on the facade. So a bar was introduced in the 1980s. Very bad repair internally, and I stress we have literally just stuck to the front of the building. There's a lot of work still to be done on both of these buildings. We used Heritage Week as an opportunity to engage the community and also to publicise the schemes that we were working on. What was quite interesting was the fact that one of the applicants, or the owners, I suppose you could say, was the Meath Chronicle. So they were a local newspaper, which was of benefit to us. They ran a spread, which was fantastic. We ourselves had a Facebook page. We had it on our own council websites as well. But they ran a nice spread where they did an interview with the owner. This is Leon, young chap. Both the hotel, the building, because sentimentally loved it, always wanted to own it, went to it when he was a kid, well, he's still a bit of a kid, but went to it when he was a bit younger as a nightclub, and always wanted to do something with it. But not much sort of finances to do that. So when he came in originally to us, he was doing some bits and pieces of repair to the rear of the building. And he was just overjoyed when we said to him, look, we're putting you forward as a potential recipient for this. So he was delighted. So he actually did an evening in Heritage Week where he set up an old photographs of all of the people who had worked there, all of the variations of ownership, and basically had a sort of an evening in here where there was a talk given by someone who had previously worked there. So a really nice thing for the community. He lit it up for Heritage Week. He put lights in all the different windows. At Christmas, actually, he put a crib outside there. So really good, enthusiastic person to work with. Strangely, both projects we ran differently. This one was much more project managed by the owner himself. His dad did quite a lot of the work as well, and they would have basically direct contracted with different people, joiners, scaffolding, etc., etc. Whereas the other building I'm going to talk about was just one contractor running it on behalf of the commercial entity. So very different approaches, but same time scale. This is Leon's dad. He did a lot of the work himself. This is them relaying. So the works themselves, we limited it to from the roof down, fixing some slip slates, ridge tiles, reconsolidating chimney if necessary, doing some lead repairs to some flashing on the roofs, and then it was just facade treatment then. So it was repairing and restoring windows where possible, new windows where we needed to. This building has a nap render finish, and it was in fairly good condition. So sand cement, we decided to retain it. There was no point in taking it off. Whereas you'll see the other building, we actually took off the render. We introduced the lime render. So both quite different projects. One of the other advantages of this site is they've got a nice terrace out the front, which was badly taken apart over the years. There were some existing flagstones remaining, which we kept. This was a trip to Kells Windows, which is where we were getting the windows refurbished and restored. This was during the summer where I'm looking from the Meath Chronicle building across to the St. Lawrence building, scaffold up. Their scaffolder left them in the lurch at the last minute, and it was a really interesting collaboration between both buildings happening at the same time, both building projects. So the contractor for the Meath Chronicle actually got the scaffolding sorted for this building, even though it was a different project. And by the end of the projects, they were both kind of chatting with each other on a daily basis and sort of sharing ideas, and it was really good. This was it finished, almost finished. Repainted, refixed the windows. We put in cast iron, new cast iron guttering where PVC had been put in the 1980s. Kept it very simple, and he didn't want anything extravagant either. He's currently in for planning permission and to open this as a cafe, which he'd hoped to get running by Christmas, but it's probably still in the process. It'll be February, March before that gets up and running. And the whole idea is that he'll now systematically refurbish the building working backwards to operate it as a boutique hotel and potentially a bar down here. So he has new railings as well on the front. Nice new shop front, the existing shop front refurbished. The budget was tight, so we tried to be really efficient with where we could and where we needed to spend money. Such things as even these 1980s cream tiles, he himself felt that he can remove those afterwards. He wasn't going to waste money on redoing those at this stage. So it's an ongoing project. Since then, actually, he's now put on a nice little sort of Victorian lamp on the front. Interestingly, here you can see there's a Vodafone cable running across. We, as part of the 2030 scheme for Navan, we're doing a lot of street works and public realm works. So we were encouraging him as well as part of this, which he did, is to put a duct running across, and this was just before Vodafone were coming to position the cabling in the ducting at the front, which was great. This is now the scaffold of the Meath Chronicle building looking across at the St. Lawrence Hotel, finished. So this is from start, and this is how it finished. That was just before Christmas. The Meath Chronicle building, interesting building in that it's just slightly younger. It's around 1750s. There were later Victorian embellishments added in concrete around the sort of late 1800s. 1910, so about 100 years later. A long history in terms of changes to the facade. The iconic sort of lettering as well had changed over the years. I think this is about the fifth or the sixth different variation of Meath Chronicle itself. Similar to the other building in that not in great repair from the facade backwards, but again, short, tight timescale. We restricted it just for the facade completely, and that was it. Commercially owned, and you can see over the years it changed. Again, Heritage Week. This is the contractor himself, very enthusiastic, very hands-on. I suppose we had to be hands-on as well. I think what it was of benefit to us was the fact that it was 5 minutes away from my office, and we brought them both through the planning process as the projects were going on. So it was a really tight timescale. We were doing Section 5s for both of them as they were practically, setting up the scaffold and starting. And there was a lot of on-site checking. From an on-site presence, it was quite heavy. These were just different sort of articles that the Meath Chronicle had ran on the building and its people who've worked in the office over the years. Internally itself, this became a bit of a can of worms, really. The more we looked and the more we investigated, we had structural problems with the facade itself. On the front, we did a lot of really bad cracking, and one of the stipulations in our Section 5 was that the structural engineer had to, coincidentally, it was a structural engineer who was running this project on behalf of the client. And one of the stipulations for the Section 5 was we wanted to see some structural reports done and investigative reports done to see what this actual problem was, because we weren't going to sort of spend money redoing the facade unless they actually solved the issue. So he came back and it turned out that it was actually more of an eaves problem in terms of the roof splaying, which had actually pushed the wall out and had considerable cracks at the front. So it wasn't really anything to do with subsidence or foundations, which we originally had suspected it would have been. So internally, a lot of the timber work was rotten as it came into the wall plate. So the wall plate itself on the first and second floors had to be taken down and re-put back in. Keeping trusses keeping floor joists where we could, sistering them up where we needed to. And you can see even from this photograph, we literally just did the facade. So the whole idea is that it's a kickstart for the owners to continue on. In this example, the Meath Chronicle were coming to us saying to me, can you come out and do a Section 57 on this? We don't know what to do with the building. What can we or can't we do? Which is why it came on our books, really. And they were finding it was up for sale. They were finding it difficult. No one was wanting to buy it because of the structural damage at the front. So we've encouraged them now potentially to rehouse their small little office in the front of this and to reuse it as an actual newspaper office again, which is fantastic. So fingers crossed, they'll now continue on with that work, seeing it through. And I think since this, they've actually engaged the contractor to come back to do systematic work through the building. So a lot of structural work to do on this, and time consuming, and we were really up to the wire in terms of trying to get it all done on time. You can see a lot of, in this instance it had a really old sand cement render, but it was really bad and all the structural problems too. We had to reconsolidate some of the window lintels, and some of the sills were all crooked, and we decided to leave them as they were because we looked at really historical photographs and they were actually like that from the very beginning, so we didn't re-straighten them. We tried to be as true to the original as we possibly could. Didn't have the budget really to do much to the roof apart from just fix a few slip slates. You can see here where this is the shop front down below. Again, budget constraints. We decided to keep this. It wasn't rotten, it was fine, so we actually just re-lead flashed it on top. In this instance, we decided then to go back with a lime render so that the building could breathe. So this is the contractor then finishing off the lime render on site. New lettering went in a resin, so we took down the kind of late 80s plastic. Nearly done. This is the lime render going back. We decided to go with historical photographs. We could see that there were originally a sort of a Georgian box style window with a sliding sash. There were no bricks around the openings, just stone, so there was no way of actually doing something with a recessed box at the side, so we decided to actually expose them and go with an older approach in terms of window. You can see on the top here where someone has replaced these with an asbestos or a fake tile, but you've only got one run of the original slates left. Again, we decided to expose the bits that we fixed and leave it true to themselves and not try and do anything to them. Interestingly, on the other building, we repainted the building and the sills were already painted and so were the coins, so we left them and just redid them, whereas on this building we exposed the stone and exposed the render and actually just left the render at the end. We haven't painted it at all. We just did another lead flashing over the shop front, kept the shop front because it was fine, there was nothing wrong with it. I just repainted it. Interestingly, the patras plates were hidden by the sand cement render that was there previously, so we exposed those. That became a bit of an issue with the contractor because he was sort of up in arms for at least 2 weeks trying to work out where he would position the lettering between the patras plates. And originally he wanted to put it between the O on works, and I was like, no, you've got to separate it out. And it was a kind of a whole job in terms of actually sort of repositioning the lettering because these were never exposed before. So you can see here we've gone back to what was an original scheme in terms of more of the late Georgian era before it had a sort of a Victorian embellishments. And just a new colour scheme on it. Here you can see where we had bad rain actually when it was the scaffolding was taken off, so the actual lime render is literally just still drying out. And then you can see there's the photograph of the Georgian kind of scheme that we went back to when it originally was 2 different shop fronts with a carriage arch, which is now joined in the 1980s. So before and after, and then this year, 2020. That's it.